Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Morning Bulletin. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer James Martin to discuss a little bit about Trent Alexander-Arnold. Recently, Dani Alves has been speaking about him and giving him a lot of praise on, I think, in an interview with 442. You can find the quotes in the description below. But essentially, he's just said that he's admired Trent for a long time now. And it's very interesting comments, isn't it? From possibly one of the best right backs in the world.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the comments interesting. It's where they're coming from. I mean, it's not the most revolutionary quotes in the world in the sense that I think we've all admired Trent Alexander-Arnold for a long time now. But yeah, to have that coming from Dani Alves is quite something. They're not necessarily the most similar in terms of playing style. I mean, Alves, of course, set the bar for attacking fullbacks, but in many ways, he was almost kind of like the right-sided equivalent of what we see with Andy Robertson. He was still almost a traditional fullback. He was just a very, very high, aggressive one, whereas Trent has maybe changed the game a little bit more in that regard. But yeah, certainly when Trent was coming through the system, as soon as he'd been moved to right-back, I'm sure he would have had his sights on Dani Alves. This is the one to aspire to, even if his game has changed a little bit since.
I was just thinking as well, Liverpool right-backs have a bit of a habit of being praised by world-class Brazilian fullbacks. You know, we had John Flanagan and Cafu. Now it looks like Dani Alves is a fan of Trent Alexander-Arnold. And I think that recognition alone, I mean, it's not really a surprise. Like you said, he is one of the best right-backs in the world. But the fact that he is being recognised for it by someone of Dani Alves' stature means a lot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit more deserved than the Scouse Cafu shouts. But yeah, it's when you look at these records that Trent is gunning towards or has broken, it's nearly always Dani Alves who's up there towards the top of them. He was, an absolute stalwart for Barcelona over the years. So I know he's back there now, but which maybe colours the quote a little bit. Maybe you're looking at them thinking, "Oh no, I hope Barcelona aren't coming for Trent." But maybe a few years ago that would have been more of a worry than now. I don't think they could afford his right boot, to be honest. But yeah, it's of course like any player will want to receive that sort of praise from someone who has thrived in that position, who's been there, done it all. Of course, one of the most decorated players of the modern era, has won a lot with Barcelona. Trent will be aspiring to those levels, and of course, yeah, with the assist charts, he'll be chasing him down. He's not far away at all in terms of over the period where they've both been playing. Of course, Alves has a bit of a head start if you go sort of career long, but I'm sure Trent will be aware of these remarks, and it will motivate him further.
I don't want to add fuel to that fire, but I did see an interview with Trent where he said after Liverpool, Barcelona was his second favourite team. So, but I don't think he's going to be wanting to move out away from Liverpool anytime soon. He will be a Liverpool legend, I think, for sure. Now, going back to the present moment, though, obviously Trent pulled out of the England squad, and Liverpool have quite a busy week after the international period ahead of them. Some important games there. How much of a miss will Trent be?
Yeah, massive miss. We were doing the Liverpool.com podcast yesterday, which I'm not sure if it's up yet, but it'll be up soon if it isn't. But you can check that out, and we're talking about our top 5 players of the season, and we were just saying how important Trent Alexander-Arnold is. He might be the most irreplaceable player in the squad, for various reasons, partly because of the profile of backup. There's just no obvious replacement when he's out, and partly because he's such a unique player. There isn't really a right back like him. I mean, as we were saying with Dani Alves, one of the best right backs there's ever been, but he's still not really the same as Alexander-Arnold. He doesn't operate in all of the same areas. So yeah, it's a massive hole to fill when he's out, and it's arguably one that can't really be filled. In terms of Klopp's options, Nico Williams is obviously gone. He's on loan at Fulham, doing very well. He was probably the most natural stylistic fit for Trent, just purely in the sense that he was a very offensively minded fullback. Those kind of areas where he operates in the kind of pockets of space in field, maybe less so, but in terms of just bombing up that flank and putting in pretty good deliveries, Williams was probably the one there. The alternatives, yeah, I mean, it's basically Joe Gomez or James Milner, isn't it? Both have their strengths. Milner probably could interpret that inside role a little bit better, obviously with the midfield background. They both, well, Milner in particular has a decent delivery, but I mean, neither of them are particularly offensively minded. Milner, of course, even defensively has a few deficiencies. We saw it most blatantly in the Manchester City game earlier in the season, where Foden ripped him to shreds. It's not necessarily a damning indictment because Foden's a very, very good player. He's done that to a lot of actual right backs as well. But yeah, it's not the most awe-inspiring cast of replacements.
That is the worry, though, isn't it? Because Manchester City is not far down the line. We don't really know the extent of Trent's injury. We don't know how long he will be out for. So there is the potential of Liverpool facing Phil Foden, Manchester City, with either Milner or Gomez playing as the right back. And how confident would you be if that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the encouraging thing for Liverpool is that we've done it before and got a result. I know it was only a draw, but required a bit of a bizarre, once in a 1 in 100 goal for them to equalise. We were on top, but yeah, obviously from that game there was the whole aspect of our right flank being targeted, and them getting a fair bit of joy down there. It goes without saying that you'd prefer Alexander-Arnold to be fit for it. And the reports when he first got injured, I think Paul Joyce said that he would be targeting the Manchester City game. With the games that come before, you'd think Liverpool probably have enough to get by without him. It's Watford and then the first leg against Benfica, I believe. So neither of them should be taken for granted, but you'd think the strength elsewhere in the squad should be enough to get Liverpool through. But yeah, if it came to the City game, you'd be so much more confident going into it with Alexander-Arnold. So we just got to hope that those initial reports are right in terms of the time frame.
Absolutely. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But in terms of looking ahead, you say Trent is irreplaceable. But I would say maybe we would have said the same thing about Andrew Robertson back a couple of years ago in 2020 before Kostas Tsimikas came along and surprised us all. Obviously, he hasn't produced the same quality as Andy Robertson, but he's up there, and I think there is the potential for Liverpool to maybe find someone like Tsimikas on the right back slot as well. How much of a priority do you think that will be in the summer?
Yeah, I think a right back will be fairly high up the list of priorities, assuming that Nico Williams leaves permanently. If he doesn't, I think probably Klopp will be relatively content to just say, okay, that's your slot. He's proved himself more at Fulham, and he's had his ups and downs for Liverpool, but I've always thought he'd looked a decent player. You can tell that he has those attacking instincts, that he's played further forward, earlier in his youth career. But assuming he does move on, and I think, if Fulham came in with a reasonable bid, in the region of sort of 10, 15 million, Liverpool would be convinced to sell, then you are looking at something that needs to be addressed. I don't think anyone believes Joe Gomez is the long-term right back. For starters, he'll want to be more than just cover eventually. It's a good way of him getting some minutes at the moment, given that he can't break in at centre-back, but he's best at centre-back and he's best when he's playing regularly, so the current situation is really not ideal for anyone. And of course, James Milner could well be off at the end of the season. The contract situation still up in the air. He's 36 now, so it's no surprise that his time will be coming to an end, whether it's this season or next season. But certainly it'll be something on the radar very soon. It's a good point about Tsimikas. No one really thought we could find such an ideal Robertson replacement, but like I was touching on with Alves before, it's the kind of difference between the traditional world-class attacking fullback and the sort of vanguard, the trailblazing role and interpretation of the role that Alexander-Arnold has offered. I think maybe as time goes by, we'll see some more viable replacements emerge, in the sense that I think we'll see a lot of copycat approaches, individual players and teams trying to think, okay, look what Liverpool are doing with the right back role. Let's see if we can replicate that. And, once that goes down to sort of academy levels, you'll be breeding this whole new generation who can maybe produce the next Trent or someone who can at least do a passable impression. But it's definitely a harder role to fill even than that Robertson gap.
Yeah, I think I have to agree, but it's not impossible potentially. Now, since we are talking about Dani Alves and Trent Alexander-Arnold, I'm going to ask you the inevitable question. Who do you think was a better right back, Dani Alves in his prime or Trent Alexander-Arnold now?
Oh, it's a brutal question. I think the game runs more through Trent than it ever did through Dani Alves. If any Barcelona fans are watching this, we're in for a world of abuse. But I think Alexander-Arnold might edge it, and the remarks from Alves himself maybe suggest that he wouldn't necessarily get too annoyed about such an opinion being held. It's both world class, both almost different profiles of players, even though they played in the same position. But if you're forcing me to pick, I think I would just, maybe my bias is showing, but I would give it to Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah, I think you can't really disagree with that or argue with it. I think that
I'm
about
sure
wraps
you
it up
can.
as well. Yeah, I'm sure Barcelona fans will disagree. But yeah, that about wraps it up for today. Thanks, James, for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure to check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today and Liverpool.com's written articles as well.